Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. In the past episodes, we've been talking about Krishna's marriage to Rukmini, and his marriage to 16,108 wives. Now we're going to go into a little bit of a taste of what it was like to be married to Krishna. But before we get started with that, let's talk about a little bit about the past, about how we got here. So first, we talk about how Krishna and Rukmini got married. Just a little recap for you. And so that's when Rukmini was writing Krishna a letter. She was going to get married to somebody else and didn't want that. So then she called Krishna to come, and he did, and he pulled her away from this guy she's supposed to get married to, and kidnapped her away from right from the wedding, right before the wedding took place. She was at the temple where she was going to be, supposedly getting ready, and then had this whole secret arrangement with Krishna. She sent him a letter saying, "Here's where I'm going to be, so come get me from here, and please, please, please save me, pull me out of this situation." She'd fallen in love with him. She'd heard about him, and they got married. So with that, that was Krishna's first marriage. And now we get a little chances to look into how that was going. So once in the company of her maidservants, Queen Rukmini was personally serving Krishna. See, now she had thousands and hundreds of maidservants, but she liked to serve him herself. Krishna is the spiritual master, the guru of the universe, teaches everyone, shows everyone, by his personal example and by his life and by his teachings, how we should live. So she's fanning him as he relaxed on her bed. And it says here, the unborn personality of Godhead. I want you to really consider this expression. First and foremost, when Krishna is known as Aja, one who is never born. But at the same time, he says all of us are never born. Never was there a time when I did not exist, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Never was there a time when and never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, and never will there be a time when we shall cease to be. For one who is born, it is certain he will die, and for one who dies, it is certain he will be born again. Certain, right? So that's his declaration. It starts with him. He is the unborn. But unlike him, he is the personality of Godhead. This is an unusual expression. You won't hear it anywhere else. And we're going to really distinguish how he is different from any other concept one might have of God. But here it refers to the personality of Godhead. Firstly, Godhead refers to there may be many, many gods. There may be many ideas of God. There may be many conceptions of God. But the Godhead, the supreme, ultimate Godhead, personified, that is Krishna. He is the supreme controller who creates, maintains, and then devours the universe simply as his play. And that Krishna was now present in front of Rukmini, and she was serving him. Because that's our eternal relationship with God, is to serve. We all want to serve someone. When you have a child, you serve that child. When you have a partner, you serve each other. And so in much the same way, she's serving Krishna, who had taken birth amongst the Yadu dynasty to preserve his own laws. In the Bhagavad Gita, that's what he tells us, that he has come into this world. He has incarnated. Who is incarnated? Vishnu, the supreme Godhead, has incarnated into this world and why has he incarnated? He is incarnated to be able to establish dharma through his teachings, like the Bhagavad Gita. And he says very clearly that I have come to annihilate the miscreants, all the people who are creating trouble on earth, and to re-establish the principles of Dharma, which he had taught initially millions of years ago to Vivaswan, to Surya, the sun god, and then from there to Vivaswan, and from there to Ikshvaku, and so on and so forth. And then that teaching was lost over time. And then he'd come to re-establish that again. And while that teaching was lost, a lot of adharma had spread all over the earth. What is adharma? The opposite of dharma. What is dharma? It is the principles by which we are meant to live on this earth. These are the guidelines by which we are meant to live here. And they are based on four things. These are called the four purusharthas. And the four purusharthas are dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Dharma meaning, and this is dharma at the human level. There is our paradharma, which is our eternal dharma, which is to find God, to love God. But the human part of our dharma is our duties, our responsibilities with our family, with our country, with ourselves and with our children and society and all of that. So that's your human level of dharma. And how do you do that? Well, you need to have artha, you need to have wealth, you need to have money. You can't do it otherwise. You can't fulfill your duties. You can't support your family. You can't take care of your children. So there needs to be artha. And with that wealth, then what do? You want to enjoy your senses. Kama. Kama is not just about sex. It's about any form of pleasure, enjoyment of the senses. And then when you've enjoyed your senses, you begin to realize, this is also temporary. This isn't really fulfilling me. Every time I can have a good meal, and then after that, well, I'm looking for something else, and then something else, and then something else. And it's a constant treadmill where I'm looking for something or other. And that's when we come to the point when we realize that there's a lot of chasing happiness, chasing pleasure, and there's also a lot of suffering here. There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of grieving. There's loss of, like death. And then there's loss of sometimes your property, your possessions, the markets going up and down, and job loss, and all kinds of situations so between those losses and the other sufferings of aging, birth, death, old age, and disease, janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi, between all these different sufferings and between the fact that everything is temporary here in this world, we begin to realize, I want to get out of this. So we look for moksha, liberation. And that's when people turn to religion of some kind. And most religions talk about that. Yes, you'll go to heaven. And then there's others who come along and say, no, we'll just go merge into the light. But all that is still motivated by something you want, which is a relief from your suffering. But Krishna is inviting you to something even higher than that. And that is love of God, pure love of God, which is unmotivated. It has no personal self-interest. Ahaitiki apratihatagya yatma suprasiddhati. That when it becomes unmotivated, your desire becomes only to inquire after God, to love God, to serve God. Then at that point, that yearning fulfills the soul at its deepest level. Liberation through meditation and merging into the light and all of that gives us peace. But that doesn't include all of us. We are beings who seek pleasure, who seek happiness, who seek love. What about all that? What about all the different aspects of ourselves? Those are fulfilled only when we come in touch with that supreme source of all creation, God or Krishna. And when we develop a loving relationship with Him. So that's what Krishna is coming to show us, not only through his teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, but also showing us what it's like to have a relationship with Him. And now we're seeing his relationship with Rukmini, and it's very interesting. It's not you'll notice that these relationships are full of all kinds of spiciness and all kinds of silliness and all kind of wisdom, all at the same time. So it begins with this. Queen Rukmini's quarters, her palace, so to speak, were extremely beautiful, boasting a canopy hung with brilliant strings of pearls as well as effulgent jewels serving as lamps. Okay, it'd be very, very beautiful. Because you see, Krishna had given separate palaces to all of his 16,108 wives. All of them had separate palaces. It says, garlands of jasmine and other flowers hung here and there, attracting swarms of humming bees, and the spotless rays of the moon shone through the holes of the lattice windows. As Aguru incense drifted out of the window holes, the breeze wafting the scent of the Parijata grove carried the mood of the garden into the room. The Parijata flower is what Krishna had brought from the heavenly kingdoms of Indra, and he had brought it for his wife Satyabhama, brought it to earth. The Parijata tree, which bore the most incredible flowers, which gave the most incredible fragrance. And so that fragrance was now coming into the room, because spreading everywhere. And there, in that situation, Queen Rukmini served her husband, the supreme lord of all the worlds, as he reclined upon an opulent pillow on her bed, which was as soft and white as the foam of milk. From her maidservant's hand, Goddess Rukmini took a yak hair fan with a jeweled handle, and then she began fanning him. Her hand adorned with rings, bangles, and the chamara fan with which she fanned him. Queen Rukmini looked resplendent, standing near Krishna. Her jeweled ankle belts tinkled and her necklace glittered, reddened by the kumkum from her breasts, which were covered by the end of her sari. On her hips she wore a priceless belt. As Krishna was looking at her, contemplating her, she, Rukmini, who is the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi herself, who desires only him, Krishna smiled. Now, why did he smile? He was looking and knowing and aware of the fact that she is Lakshmi. The Lord assumes various forms to enact his pastimes, and he was pleased that the form of the goddess of fortune, that the goddess of fortune Lakshmi had assumed, was just suitable for her to serve as his consort. Her charming face was adorned with curling hair, earrings, a locket of her on her neck, and the nectar of her bright, happy smile. In the purport, there's an explanation given. It says that when Krishna appears as a human being in a human-like form, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, also takes a human-like form. The body she assumes matches the one he takes. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes that Krishna is even more beautiful than Vishnu, and his consort Rukmini Devi is even more attractive than Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune in the spiritual world, which the Vedas refer to as Vaikuntha, the place where there is no anxiety. So that's what the spiritual world is called. This is within the light of the Brahma Jyoti. Most people talk of going into the light, merging with the light, becoming one with the light, all of that. But within the light, there are planets called the Vaikuntha planets. And those places are places where there is no anxiety. Why is there no anxiety? Because there's nothing to worry about. You're living there in a spiritual form. You have a form, yes. You're not just merged into the light. You have a form on those planets. And that form is not subject to birth or death or old age or disease. It is not subject to hunger or thirst or lamentation of any kind. There is nothing to worry about. You're living in endless time. You're not worried about your day-to-day living. You're not worried about how are you going to get food, how are you going to pay the bills. None of that. There is life beyond this life. There is life beyond this material existence. There is life that is calling for us. And that's why Krishna comes here, to show us what that life is. So Vishnu and Lakshmi live in the Vaikuntha planets. It's Lakshmi and that's Vishnu. So at this point, Krishna was looking at Rukmini and he says, "My dear princess," because she was a princess before, they got married, and now she's the queen. "My dear princess, you were sought after by many kings who were powerful rulers. They were all abundantly endowed with political influence and wealth and beauty and generosity and physical strength. Since your brother and father offered you to them, because she was supposed to get married to someone else, why did you reject all those other suitors who stood before you maddened by Cupid? Why instead did you choose us, who were not at all your equal? He's testing her. He's kind of like teasing her here. Terrified of these kings, we, that is Krishna, took shelter in the ocean created by the, where he's talking, referring to the island of Dwarka where he created his kingdom. So, terrified of these kings, we took shelter in the ocean. He's acting like someone who's scared. And therefore he built this island of Dwarka in the middle of the ocean and says, oh, we were terrified of them, therefore I came and hid on this island. We have become enemies of powerful men and we practically abandoned our royal throne. Well, he gave his throne of the kingdom of Mathura to his grandfather Ugrasena, although Krishna was entitled to it. Women are usually destined to suffer when they stay with men whose behavior is uncertain and who pursue a path not approved by society. If someone chooses a path less traveled, it leads a life that is quite, not part of the norm, well, there's a good chance they'll be rejected by society, they'll be maybe shunned in some way, they'll be hated, or maybe not, but there's a good chance. He says, we have no material possessions, and we are dear to those who similarly have nothing. Therefore, O slender one, the wealthy hardly ever worship me. Marriage and friendship are proper between two people who are equal in terms of their wealth, birth, influence, physical appearance, and capacity for good progeny, but never between a superior and an inferior. So he's referring to her as superior and himself as inferior. He's taking this very humble position. O Vaidarbhi Rukmini. Vaidarbha is the place where she was from, so she's known as Vaidarbhi. So, O Vaidarbhi, O Rukmini, not being far-sighted, you didn't realize this, and therefore you chose us as your husband, even though we have no good qualities and are glorified only by deluded beggars. Now you should definitely accept a more suitable husband, a first-class man of the royal order who can help you achieve everything you want, both in this life and the next. Kings like Shishupal, Shalva, Jarasandha, Dantavakra all hate me. Oh, beautiful one, and so does your elder brother Rukmini. If you've been following the earlier story, you know she was supposed to get married to Shishupal, and then her brother wanted her to marry Shishupal, and she wanted to marry Krishna, but her brother was going to have it his way, and he was forcing his way upon her, his sister, to get married to Shishupal, and that's why she had written to Krishna to rescue her and take her away from the clutches of this person. She was not going to didn't know we're going to marry him. She would rather die than marry him. And so Krishna had come and pulled her away from that. Marriage was supposed to happen in the next day or two. Then Krishna continues, it was to dispel the arrogance of these kings that I carried you away, my good woman, for they were blinded by the intoxication of power. My purpose was to curb the strength of the wicked. So he says, I've done my job. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and get married to someone else. It's perfectly okay. Krishna says, we care nothing for wives, children, and wealth. I'm not attached to these things. I'm always satisfied within myself. We do not work for body and home, but just like a light, we merely witness. There's so much truth in this. There's so much truth, and there's so many layers of truth within all this teasing and this kind of leg pulling that he's doing. Rukmini had thought herself especially beloved by Krishna because he never left her company. You see, this was the incredible thing that Krishna was doing, is that with each and every one of his wives, he had cloned himself, expanded him. Actually, the word clone would not be right. He had expanded himself. He had become multiple Krishnas. If there were 16,108 wives, there were also 16,108 Krishnas. And each one of those wives thought that he was only with her. So Rukmini thought herself especially beloved because Krishna never left her company. By saying these things to her, he vanquished her pride, and then he stopped speaking. Goddess Rukmini had never heard such unpleasantries from her beloved, the Lord of universal rulers, and she became frightened. A terror arose in her heart, and in terrible anxiety she began to cry. With her tender foot, effulgent with the reddish glow of her nails, she scratched the ground, and tears, darkened by her eye makeup, sprinkled all over her breasts. And there she stood, face downward, her voice choked up with extreme sorrow. Rukmini's mind was overwhelmed with unhappiness, fear, and grief. Her bangles slipped from her hand, and her fan fell to the ground. In her bewilderment, she suddenly fainted, her hair scattering all about as her body fell to the ground like a plantain tree blown over by the wind. Seeing that his beloved was so bound to him in love that she could not understand the full meaning of his teasing, merciful Krishna felt compassion for her. He quietly got down from the bed, manifesting 4 arms. He picked her up, gathered her hair, and caressed her face with his lotus hand. Wiping her tear-filled eyes, which were stained with tears of grief, the Supreme Lord, the goal of his devotees, embraced his chaste wife, who desired nothing but him. Expert in the art of pacification. Manana, to be able to pacify, is very important for a man, to know how to pacify his wife. So expert in the art of pacification, Sri Krishna tenderly consoled Rukmini, whose mind was bewildered by his clever joking and who did not deserve to suffer so. Krishna said, "O Rukmini, do not be displeased with me. I know that you are fully devoted to me. I only spoke in jest because I wanted to hear what you would say. I also wanted to see your face with lips trembling in loving anger, the reddish corners of your eyes throwing sidelong glances, and the line of your beautiful eyebrows knit in a frown. The greatest pleasure worldly householders can enjoy at home is to spend time joking with their beloved wives. My dear, timid, and temperamental one." Queen Rukmini was fully pacified by Krishna and understood that his words had been spoken jokingly. Thus she gave up her fear that her beloved would reject her. Because that was her deep fear, was that he's going to reject her, he's going to leave her, as anyone would be, right? You've got the most incredible partner of all. You've got the most incredible husband of all. And now you're suddenly afraid he might leave you. I mean, he has 16,108 wives. He could go to any one of them and leave you behind. You know, it's a pretty scary situation. But that's not Krishna. Smiling bashfully as she cast charming, affectionate glances upon his face, he who is the best of males, Rukmini said, "Actually, what you have said is true." Now she's coming back with her rebuttal, okay, so just watch. "What you have said is true, O lotus-eyed one. I am indeed unsuitable for the almighty personality of Godhead." She knows who he is. What comparison is there between that Supreme Lord who is the master of the 3 primal deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and who delights in his own glory, and myself, a woman of mundane qualities whose feet are grasped by fools? So this is also an interesting statement, because many foolish people, many foolish kings were warning her. And also, if you think at a deeper level, as Lakshmi, many people want Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, because they want wealth. And so they want to get her, just as Ravan took Sita. He wanted Lakshmi without Vishnu. Vishnu was Ram. He wanted to take her away for himself. And just as we want to take wealth away for ourselves, without any regard for the owner of that wealth, the Lord of Lakshmi, who is Vishnu. Right? Just as Ravan took away Sita, we want to take wealth away and usurp it for ourselves. And then we call this as my money, my house, my car, my bank balance, my body, my everything. But that is that ego in play. And the reality is everything belongs to God. Everything belongs to Vishnu. Lakshmi is his beloved, his partner. And whatever you get from her is for the enjoyment of Vishnu. Whatever you have is for the enjoyment of God. So then she says, "Yes, my Lord Urukrama." Urukrama means you who perform transcendental feats. Transcendental means that which is not mundane, transcendental. You lay down within the ocean as if afraid of the material modes, And thus in pure consciousness you appear within the heart as the Paramatma, the super soul. Now, this is kind of difficult to understand, so the purport explains it like this. Krishna had said, out of fear of the kings, we took shelter in the ocean. We created an island, Dwarka, in the middle of the ocean. So he had said that in his jest. However, Rukmini Devi points out that the actual rulers of this world are the gunas, the material modes of nature, which impel all living beings to act. See, we are all subjected to the modes of goodness, passion, or ignorance. These are states of consciousness. The state of goodness causes us not just to do good things, but also to engage in acts that are spiritual, that uplift us, that bring us closer to God. So we eat a certain way, we live a certain way, and people who are in the mode of goodness are generally peaceful and content and satisfied. So they eat accordingly and they live accordingly. People in the mode of passion are always wanting more, seeking for wealth, seeking for all pleasure, seeking for all kinds of things, more and more and more and more. So in the mode of passion, right? They're the doers and movers and shakers of the world. And people in the mode of ignorance are the ones who are depressed and who are feeling hopeless and feeling beat down and feeling like there's no chance for them to move forward. So they go through life as if it was a grind. So these are the modes of nature that influence us. And we can change that, certainly. We can step out of that. But what she's pointing out, the actual rulers of this world are the gunas, the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, which impel all living beings to act. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that because Krishna fears that his devotee will come under the influence of the modes of nature and become entangled in sense gratification, he enters the internal ocean of their heart, where he remains as the omniscient witness, the Paramatma, the super soul, to protect his devotees. In other words, he's there within the heart of his devotee, guiding us to do the right thing, to come on the path of devotion, to come on the path of love of God, so that we may not forget why we're here. For the average person, they don't listen to that quiet voice within their heart. They don't listen to that quiet voice in which God is trying to guide them. Some people call that conscience. They don't listen. They've tuned that out. They listen only to their mind. They listen only to their ego, but they don't listen to that quiet voice within. That's the first thing that comes up. And most people don't listen to it. But those who are on the path towards God, he especially tries to guide them and keep them on track so that they may come back to him. So it says here, he enters the internal ocean of their heart, where he remains as the omniscient witness, the super soul, the Paramatma, to protect his devotees. It's a beautiful way of looking at it. Then Rukmini continues, you are always battling against the foolish material senses. And even your servants reject the privilege of royal dominion, which leads to the blindness of ignorance. Once again, a little bit of explanation might be helpful. Krishna had said, we created enmity with the powerful. Here, Srimati Rukmini Devi points out that it is the material senses which are actually powerful in this world. So, there was the modes of nature, and then there are our senses. That's the other enemy that we've got to work with. The Supreme Lord has taken up the battle against our sense gratification on part of his devotees, and thus he is constantly trying to help them in their struggle for purifying themselves spiritually. When the devotees become free of unwanted material habits, known as anarthas, the Supreme Lord reveals himself to them, and then the eternal loving relationship with his devotees becomes an irrevocable fact, that which cannot be revoked. Once that loving relationship is established, then there's no going back. Then you are his and he is yours. Rukmini says, your movements, inscrutable even for sages who relish the honey of your lotus feet. So inscrutable means it cannot be understood even by great wise people, sages, saintly people who relish the honey of your lotus feet, are certainly incomprehensible for human beings who behave like animals. And just as your activities are transcendental, O all-powerful Lord, so too are those of your followers. So again, it's best to understand what she's saying here. In purport, it says, "O fine-browed lady, women are usually destined to suffer when they stay with men whose behavior is uncertain and who pursue a path not approved by society." So this is what Krishna had said. And he said that, now Rukmini interprets those words saying, unworldly path is the path of those who are entangled in worldly behavior, as those who are entangled in worldly behavior trying to enjoy this world are more or less like animals. Even if such people are culturally advanced, and you'll see there's many people like that, very culturally advanced, very dignified, very sophisticated, still they are to be considered sophisticated or polished animals. She points out that because the Supreme Lord's activities are always transcendental, they are unclear to ordinary people. And even though great sages cannot perfectly understand these activities, it's important to understand that He is here trying to show us the deeper realization of who we are and what our life is for. Rukmini then says, "You possess nothing because there is nothing beyond you." She's taking each of his words and each of his statements and showing the deeper meaning within them. So she says, "You possess nothing because there is nothing beyond you." This is going to be a very insightful point she's making. Beyond the great enjoyers of tribute, Brahma and other devas, the demigods, all of them pay tribute to you. Those who are blinded by their wealth and absorbed in gratifying their senses do not recognize you in the form of death. Usually we don't recognize God, and ultimately we come to the point of death, and many at that point of death say they've seen something very amazing. Even Steve Jobs said that in the last moments of his life. And usually they're seeing something of a divine nature, something not of this world. Or maybe they're seeing something terrible. Most of them talk about seeing something very beautiful, something very godly, and they don't know quite what it is. And she says, even the devas, the demigods, the enjoyers of tribute who are often worshipped by various people, even for them you are the most dear as they are to you. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada begins the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam with, and this is really, really key, please pay attention here. He says in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, first canto, almost like the first few verses, the conception of God and the absolute truth are different. See, the Srimad Bhagavatam speaks about this, the absolute truth, or the Param Satyam. Param Satyam Dhimahi. I worship the absolute truth. What is the absolute truth? This is what we must get clear about. It says here that while God is the controller of everything, God is the commonly defined as the supreme being. But this definition does not adequately indicate absolute existence. For example, a wealthy American may be the wealthiest amongst his peers. But the Supreme Court, so we have the Supreme Court, right? While it's the highest court, lacks absolute authority in all political and social matters. The word supreme implies the best in a hierarchy, right? So the wealthiest person or the highest court, it's the best in a hierarchy. So the supreme being may be the greatest being, but that doesn't mean that supreme being is necessarily the source of all other beings and everything that exists. The concept of the absolute truth, Krishna, surpasses that of a supreme being, because he is not only the source of everything, but also everything exists within him. Krishna is not merely a supreme being. He is the absolute being, the absolute truth. In other words, all that exists is within him. There is nothing that exists outside of him for him to possess. For example, a man may possess a house, a car, or money, but these things do not become the man. They exist outside of him. We say he possesses them merely in the sense that he has control over them. But Krishna does not merely control his creation. His creation actually exists within him. Thus, there is nothing outside of him. that he can possess. In this way, in the way we possess external objects. In other words, there is nothing except him. There is only him. Whatever you see is him. Everything in this world is God. You may say, where is God? Everywhere. Everything you see is okay, let's break it down scientifically. Everything you see around you is energy, is made of energy. Okay, everything you see around you is made of atoms and molecules and so on. Those atoms and molecules, when broken down even further, become observe them as quarks and so on. And ultimately, we break it down, we notice that they are waves. And those waves are energy. That energy that is spread all across the universe, of which all planets are made, and of which all living beings are made, and of which all movable and immovable things are made, right? Those things throughout the universe, through the millions of universes that exist, all of that is his energy. And that energy is within him. So that which is holding everything within itself, that is that absolute truth. Queen Rukmini describes Krishna as niskinchana, meaning he possesses nothing, because he is everything. In Sanskrit, the word kinchana refers to something finite. A person may possess a finite amount of wealth, property, power, etc. But Krishna is niskinchana, which means he possesses an infinite amount of knowledge. He knows everything. Why? Because he is everything. So he knows everything. Just as everything within your body, you know where you feel a little itching here, or your stomach, your arm, your foot is having a little itch or a pain or problem. You know. You're aware of everything that's going on. So he has an infinite amount of knowledge, knows everything. He has an infinite amount of wealth. Everything is owned by him. He has infinite strength, which you see again and again in the pages of the Bhagavatam, how many people tried to kill him, but no one is able to. None, no one, no matter how powerful. If there's 1 million soldiers standing out there outside his palace in Mathura, he kills all of them. That's it. He's got no one can do anything to him. We've seen other people who came along who were killed by messengers, sons of God. They were killed. But Krishna, no one was able to kill, not until he decided to leave this world. So he has unlimited strength. Even as a baby, he had unlimited strength. There were many asuras or demons who came to kill him. Putana came with poison on her breast when he is a baby and tried to suckle him, and he sucked the life out of her and killed her. No one was able to harm him in any way. He's got an infinite amount of fame. He's known everywhere, whether you hate him or you love him, whether you believe in him or don't believe in him, whether you call him by one name or another. He's known to everyone. And he is the source of all beauty. He is an infinite amount of beauty. So this term is called Bhagavan, the one who possesses all opulences. Bhagavan. This term signifies Krishna's absolute nature, encompassing all opulences infinitely. Rukmini, Queen Rukmini, highlights that while Krishna is dear to those with nothing, so those with nothing means those people who realize that nothing is mine. Right? Those who have then devoted their life to God, those are the people with nothing. She says, those highly evolved beings, those saintly beings who understand that they have nothing, that they are nothing, right? Krishna is dear to them. And even the wealthy devas, the demigods, who are in charge of this material creation and who possess incredible amounts of wealth and so on, they recognize his supremacy and offer him worship, as we saw with the way Indra came to Krishna and worshipped him, and Brahma and Shiva and all of them. They all come and worship him. She says, you, my dear Krishna, are the embodiment of all human goals, and you are yourself the final aim of life. Desiring to attain you, intelligent persons abandon everything else. It is they who are worthy of your association. Those who desire nothing else except you, who have nothing else except you. You are the greatest wealth of all. It is they who are worthy of your association, not the men and women absorbed in the pleasure and grief resulting from mutual lust. Knowing that great sages who have renounced the sannyasi's danda, that means those who have gone even beyond renunciation, the paramhamsas, the greatest of highly evolved beings, even they proclaim your glories, that you are the supreme soul of all the worlds, and that you are so gracious that you give away even your own self. I chose you as my husband, rejecting Brahma, Shiva, and the rulers of heaven, whose aspirations are all frustrated by the force of time, which is born from your eyebrows. What interest then could I have in any other suitors? At this point, in the purport, it is written, Krishna also made two specific accusations against his wife when he said, My dear Vidarbhi, Rukmini, you are not aware of the situation because you lack foresight, he said. In the present verse, Rukmini says, I chose you as my husband because you possess the above-mentioned qualities. It was not a blind choice at all. Rukmini mentions that she passed over lesser personalities, including the rulers of the heavenly planets, because she saw that even though, materially speaking, they are great, but unfortunately, even they are frustrated by the powerful waves of time which emanate from the eyebrows of Sri Krishna. Therefore, far from lacking foresight, Rukmini chose Krishna after an exhaustive appraisal of the entire cosmic situation and with full knowledge of his true glories. See, her rebuttals are perfect and completely well thought and so deep in her thinking. Rukmini continued, as a lion drives away lesser animals to claim his proper tribute, you drove off the assembled kings with the resounding twang of your saranga bow and then claimed me. Thus it is sheer foolishness for you to say you took shelter in the ocean out of fear of those kings. See, for her to be claimed is such a powerful thing. For her, that he fought for her, that he fought away all those other kings and claimed her, which was her desire too. That is powerful. And I think a lot of men need to learn that this is a powerful way to be able to approach a woman. Many times they become hesitant or they become doubtful or try to be, too respectful. Respectful is needed, but at the same time, you've got to stake your claim. You've got to tell the woman, this is what you want. This is what you stand for. You love her. You want her. Krishna did that very clearly and showed us that is the way of the masculine. And for a woman, it's very important to be wanted, to be desired, to be claimed. These are concepts that people are beginning to understand now in today's time. But for a long time, due to the rise of feminism, they've said, no. Claimed someone is bad. That's not good. Right? I'm my own person. One has to dive deep into this understanding of the masculine and feminine natures to understand we are different. Men and women are different. Men have now begun losing their masculinity and women increasing their masculinity and losing their femininity. So it's important to come back to that and learn from these examples that there is a better way. And I know of many women who are realizing these points and starting to understand what it's like to be claimed in this way, to be wanted, to be desired, to have someone stake there. This is what I want. I want you above all else. Right. So she continues, wanting your association, the best of kings abandoned their absolute sovereignty and entered the forest to seek you out. Meaning that kings in that time, when they got older, they gave their kingdom away to their best qualified son, usually, and went to the forest to perform penance and austerity, tapasya, and meditation. And in that meditation, they would seek out that supreme being, Krishna. So how could those kings suffer frustration in this world? She says, the aroma of your lotus feet, which is glorified by great saints, awards people liberation and is the abode of goddess Lakshmi, which is herself. What woman would take shelter of any other man after savoring that aroma? Since you are the abode of transcendental qualities, what mortal woman with the insight to distinguish her own true interest would disregard that fragrance and depend instead on someone who is always subject to terrible fear? So that includes everyone. Every human being is subject to terrible fear. And she's saying, who would choose anyone except you if they had the opportunity, if they could, if you would accept them, who would choose anyone else? Because you are suitable for me, I have chosen you, the master and supreme soul of the worlds, of all the worlds. You who fulfill our desires in this life and the next. May your feet, which give freedom from illusion. So why is this emphasis on feet? I think it's an important point to understand. It's this point of surrender, surrendering to the feet of someone. That is an expression used in the Vedic terms. For example, if one's parents, one would touch their feet. Of the guru, one would touch their feet. Why? To get blessings. So that those very feet are known to be holy. That is the place of bowing down, of respect. And when you give that respect, you are blessed by that person. So when they talk about the lotus feet of Krishna, they mean those beautiful feet. She says, may your feet, which give freedom from illusion. Freedom from illusion. What illusion? The illusion of this world, from Maya. From thinking that this is me, and this is mine. This is the illusion of thinking this body is me and the things I own are mine. Or the family or the children I have are mine, or the husband and wife that I have is mine. That's the illusion. That's the matrix, if you want to use that. Right? Your feet, but by surrendering to his feet, which give freedom from illusion by approaching the worshipper, their worshipper, give shelter to me, who have been wandering from one material situation to another. So she's putting herself in our shoes, though she is not subject to this at all. And putting herself in our shoes, she says, we have been wandering from one material situation to another. And finally, we have come to the lotus feet of Krishna, and we need to surrender to him. O infallible Krishna, let each of the kings you named become the husband of a woman whose ears have never heard your glories, which are sung in the assemblies of Shiva and Brahma. After all, in the households of such women, these kings live like asses, oxen, dogs, cats, and slaves. Okay, let's explain that. In the purport it says, according to Srila Sridhar Goswami, these fiery words of Queen Rukmini are a response to Krishna's statement where he said, you were sought after by many kings as powerful as the rulers of planets. They were all abundantly endowed with political influence, wealth, beauty, generosity, and physical strength. Queen Rukmini here speaks with anger, pointing her index finger at Krishna, and she compares the so-called great princes to asses asses meaning donkeys, because they carry many material burdens, to oxen, because they are always distressed while performing their occupational duties. So oxen often in the old days, would carry heavy loads, also be attached to a plow and then be used to plow the land. So they had to do a lot of physical work. So they were distressed. Or to dogs because their wives disrespect them. To cats because those people are selfish and cruel. And to slaves because they are servile in family affairs. Such kings may appear desirable to a foolish woman who has not heard or understood the glories of Sri Krishna. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur adds that such kings are like asses because their wives sometimes kick them, like dogs because they behave inimically towards outsiders in order to protect their homes, and like cats because they eat the remnants left by others. Rukmini then continues, a woman who fails to relish the fragrance of the honey of your lotus feet becomes totally befooled, and thus she accepts as her husband or lover a living corpse, covered with skin, whiskers, nails, head hair and body hair, and filled with flesh, bones, blood, parasites, feces, mucus, bile, and air. Purport is explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He quotes the statement, Savai Patihi Sayad Bhayasvayam. He indeed should become one's husband who can remove all fear. So this is a very wise statement. one should take as one's husband one who can remove all fear to the best of one's ability if he's a human being. But ultimately, that person is Krishna. Shri Krishna is the real husband for all women at all times. A woman who worships someone else as her husband simply worships. This is a very strong statement. A woman who worships someone else as her husband simply worships a dead body. So these are the statements of very evolved, saintly persons. We are not at their level, but he sees it that way. So let it be his way of looking at it. But I mean, at the deepest level, there is truth in it. Every one of us is a dead body. Today we're alive. In a few years, this body will be dead. So, and we have become attached to this person or another person. Basically what he's saying is, be attached to that which is eternal. Be attached to that Supreme Lord who will always be yours, who will always be with you life after life. O lotus-eyed one, though you are satisfied within yourself, so this is Rukmini again, O lotus-eyed, although you are satisfied within yourself and thus rarely turn your attention towards me, please bless me with steady love for your feet. It is when you assume a predominance of passion in order to manifest the universe that you glance upon me, showing me what is indeed your greatest mercy. So now she's referring to something that reveals her real nature. Rukmini Devi is Krishna's internal potency. She's his internal energy. She's very, she's part of him. And here she humbly identifies herself as the external energy, which is her expansion. She says, though you do not often look at me, when you are ready to manifest this material universe, you show me your greatest. So in other words, he glances at the external energy, and when the moment he glances at that external energy, now all the universes start to form. It's like he impregnates the external energy with his glance. So the same way as a man impregnates a woman, have a baby, the Supreme Lord Vishnu impregnates the external energy, or Maya Devi, in this case Lakshmi, with his glance. And through that glance, the entire cosmos becomes created. Then she says, actually, I don't consider your words false. Quite often an unmarried girl is attracted to a man. The mind of a promiscuous woman always hankers for new lovers, even if she is not married. An intelligent man should not keep such an unchaste wife, for if he does, he will lose his good fortune both in this life and the next. Now Krishna replies to her. He says, O saintly lady, O princess, we deceived you only because we wanted to hear you speak like this. Indeed, everything you said in reply to my words is most certainly true. Whatever benedictions you hope for in order to become free of material desires are ever, eternally yours. O fair and noble lady, for you are my unalloyed devotee. O sinless one, I have now seen firsthand the pure love and chaste attachment you have for me, your husband. Even though shaken by my words, your mind could not be pulled away from me. Although I have the power to award spiritual liberation, materialistic persons worship me with penance and vows in order to get my blessings for their mundane family life. Such persons are bewildered by my illusory energy, Maya. O supreme reservoir of love, Krishna says to Rukmini, unfortunate are they who, even after obtaining me, who can award liberation and material riches, they hanker only for material treasures. These worldly gains can be found even in hellish planets. Such persons who are obsessed with sense gratification, for them, the hellish planets are a fitting place. Fortunately, O mistress of the house, you have always rendered me faithful devotional service which liberates one from material existence. This service is very difficult for the envious to perform, especially for a woman whose intentions are wicked, who lives only to gratify her bodily demands and who indulges in duplicity. So he's saying that this kind of devotion that she has, you have rendered me faithful devotional service which liberates one from material existence. Meaning, again, as we said earlier, it's unmotivated. It's not wanting something for oneself. It's not wanting any material desire for oneself, a nice house, a nice car, this, that, the other. No. It's not even wanting liberation for oneself. It's just wanting to be able to please the object of your love, your beloved. That is true love. In all my palaces, Krishna says, I can find no other wife as loving as you, O most respectful one. When you were to be married, you disregarded all the kings who had assembled to seek your hand, and simply because you had heard authentic accounts concerning me, you sent a Brahmin to me with your confidential message. And that's when she'd been writing that letter. And then she sent a message with the Brahmin. And Krishna was reading it. When your brother, who had been defeated in battle and then disfigured, was later killed during a gambling match on Aniruddha's wedding day, you felt unbearable grief, yet out of fear of losing me, you spoke not a word. By this silence you have conquered me. This actually gives a little indicator as to what lies ahead. So we're going to go into that next part. When you sent the messenger with your most confidential plan, and yet I delayed going to you, you began to see the whole world as void and wanted to quit your body, which could never have been given to anyone but me. So she wasn't willing, she didn't want to live. If she was going to be with someone else, she didn't want to be with them. No, she only wanted to be with Krishna. May this greatness of yours remain with you always. I can do nothing to reciprocate except joyfully thank you for your devotion. And so, for the self-satisfied Supreme Lord of the universe, he enjoyed himself with the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, in the form of Rukmini. And they engaged in lovers' talks, thus imitating the ways of human society. The Almighty Sri Krishna, preceptor or guru of all the worlds, similarly behaved like a conventional householder in the palaces of his other queens, performing the religious duties of a family man. So if any of you have any questions, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you've been, what you make of all of this. There's been a lot that's been talked about, and I'd love to hear your take on it. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you for being here then. I guess I'll see you next week. We'll continue because we're learning more and more. We're now in Krishna's household affairs, and by the next week we'll get to see more of how he expanded himself further to bring about the establishment of Dharma into this world. All right. Thank you, Rima. Thank you, Swati. Thank you so much. We've got some folks on Instagram as well. If you have any questions, write them down. I will reply, I promise you. And for those of you that are watching this later on, please feel free to write down your questions in the comments. And remember that we're here every week, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern, and in India, 7:30 a.m. on Wednesday. So Tuesday for the US and Wednesday morning, 7:30 a.m. for India. Okay? All right. I'll see you next week. Take care. Hare Krishna.